I have a story for everyone. So, so there I was talking with someone about elevators, actually. And what we were talking about
Who was their elevator pitch?
was
Who was their elevator pitch?
it was their elevator pitch. And what we were talking about was was ways to optimize the algorithms for getting passengers from one floor to another.
It has its ups and downs.
Master of the pun, Chet Haase, here to join us. Drunk on Software episode.
Have we talked about who Chet is?
Chet is our Bay Area correspondent.
Of course, but who Chet is in relation to Drunk on Software?
Chet is our...
Mascot.
No, he's definitely our Bay Area correspondent. The only problem is Bay Area. Rawr. James is funny. He's not drunk. He's not high. But he's something.
Drunk on Software.
James, so in terms of optimizing algorithms, Chet can tell us more about himself in a minute. Every time I've ridden the elevator here at the Marriott this week, I've seen not that long actually, but there's been a TV in there with a Microsoft Windows recovery screen, and it's not touchscreen. But every time I feel the need to try and hit the button to reboot for them, so I think they're a long way from optimizing.
And here's the point of the story.
All right. Back to the story.
This is where it gets good. This is where it gets good. So here, some research group came in and was trying to research, all right, what's the most optimal way that we can optimize the algorithm for moving people from floor to floor in elevators? And they determined that it really doesn't fucking matter. As long as you put a mirror or a television there in the waiting area. If you look around at every place where there, like upscale hotels where there are elevators, the waiting areas also have mirrors. Fascinating fact. When there is a mirror by the elevator, somehow time passes quickly and you're not as concerned about how long you're waiting for elevators. And the moral of the story is...
So it's all about the reflection APIs.
Did you go for the pun again? You've only talked twice and you have 2 puns.
I don't have anything else to say.
James, is there a metaphor in this, or should I just ask Chet to tell us more about himself? Nod yes or no with the bare head. What's the metaphor, James? I don't think he gets the microphone yet. Chet is a member of the Flex SDK team. Well, I don't know what we're talking about. I think it's our second best intro to Chet apologizing for his participation in the show.
No, there's a metaphor.
Are you going to make another pun?
No. It's life is not about the fun. The point the point of life is not the journey, but about how we reflect upon it. We need to look around and look at ourselves in the journey, not think about how fast we're getting to the end point. I think it's deep. I think it's totally deep. So the point of software should not be to get us to our destination faster. It should be to allow us to enjoy the process of getting there, right? And that brings me to our point this evening, which is better user experience in software.
So, if the point is not to get us there faster, and it's to have a better experience, are you suggesting that we just put windows and TVs on everything? Mirrors, sorry. So we can look at ourselves, or... Welcome to the show, Chet. Why don't you tell us a little about what you're doing at Adobe these days?
Probably the same thing I was doing last time we talked, which is Flex Effects. I'm working on
Wait, when you say effects, you mean like Java effects?
No.
I don't know if anybody heard what I just said anyway.
Flex Effects, it's kind of a buzzword when you hear effects. People talking to Flex,
FX.
they mean animations.
Wait, when you say FX, you mean
Effects, they don't mean FX as in other logos or products that have nothing to do with animations. I'm working on animation software for Flex 4. I have been since I arrived on the runway about a year and a half ago, and I ain't done yet. The Adobe runway. The tarmac, where they let me off.
sometimes you need to get de-iced on that runway.
Chet, do you think Peter's going to watch this episode? I didn't think you needed a microphone for that. I have a serious question, and we should talk about this on camera because maybe one of our female viewers has a solution to how to get Chet on more. Chet, how do we make you more a part of the podcast? You're a valuable member of the team, but you're never on the show, and it's kind of a conflict.
So it turns out that you actually film the show in locations where I'm not. More often than not.
What if we had mirrors? Would you be able to?
Well, then I could watch myself in the mirror while you film the show.
But don't mirrors make you not care how long it takes?
Yeah, well, then I wouldn't care about not being on the show. So then I would be happy. But it doesn't help me actually be on the show.
Welcome back. Chet has agreed to travel to Denver to talk about Degrapha, and we'll see him in LA. James, you're creepy. Chet's going to tell us about, as if he never has before, about effects and also why enterprise developers care and why you're on that rant. Also, does Degrapha fit with what you do? Is it the same thing? Is it overlap? Can you animate? I want Chet to tell me that he can animate Degrapha because he can animate anything now because he can animate any object.
So my understanding of Degrapha, which is pretty third hand since I haven't used it directly, is that they had third, as in you have one and then you have two, and then what the hell are you doing with the third one?
I always think of like Goodwill being like second hand. So this is even worse than Goodwill.
That's right. Goodwill wouldn't even take my third hand. I don't know. So they enabled declarative graphics at a point where if you wanted to do custom graphics in Flex applications, you basically dove down into ActionScript code and you issued Flash API calls. Yeah, draw, rect, set your fill and draw your rect and all that stuff with Flash. Had all your fun down there, which is all very fine. But if you wanted to do declarative down under the MXML layer, if you wanted to do declarative graphics and say my application wants to have a rect in it, well, there really wasn't a way, and I believe a rect.
That's a weird word. A rect. Can we repeat that? A rect.
I said rect.
Or James or FX.
And now in Flex 4 we have declarative graphics, so we have the graphics tag, so you can do a rect through Flex 4 or an ellipse or a line or a path. So there is overlap from what Degrapha used to do and some of the stuff that we now do with graphics tags, although I believe our stuff is fairly straightforward and simple, and Degrapha enables more capabilities on top of that. I don't know firsthand, Anyway, it's still worth checking out the graphic stuff. What else were you asking about? FX.
The important thing about FXG is the fact that FXG was actually supported in Creative Sword.
Creative Sword. Exactly. Thank you, James. Great. He's abbreviating because James is an evangelist and he's a very busy guy. What he was trying to say was Creative Suite 4, and that's abbreviated officially in terms of Creative Sword. Yes, so you can now be in Illustrator, CS4, and have it save as FXG and import that and use it in your Flex project directly, because we deal with FXG elements directly as graphics elements in Flex 4, or as we like to call them, Sword, CS4 documents. John.
Am I supposed to say something?
You were asking for the mic.
So this is going to end in a Flex question, but first I wanted to share with our 14 viewers left at this point in the episode the taxi ride from the Adobe offices to the dinner. Well, I don't know if it was to dinner. We were there a couple hours and then they fed us, but there's a plot to kill Gavin Newsom, and I just wanted that out there. And I unintentionally contributed. And then I want Chet to tell us about.
I don't think that's appropriate for a podcast. We're going to have the FBI on this.
We are not participating in the plot to kill Gavin Newsom. There's a taxi driver that voluntarily shared about this in his fund too. And I refused to tip him because I didn't want to be an accomplice. Any other legal issues you want me to clear up, James?
But you know, are we going to report this to the authorities?
I just did publicly on my video cast. I'm sure that that'll get more attention than me calling the police and saying some crazy taxi driver. But moving beyond this story, I just...
Edit this part out.
You don't know how to edit out, James. James, move the bear mouth. Thank you. That's as useful as you talking because you don't have the mic. This is Wedding Singer. One more word. I have the microphone. And one more word out of you, sir, and I'll strangle you with the microphone cord. Chet, I would love to, as if I never have 5 minutes ago when we turned off the microphone accidentally, hear more about effects, and animation, and what the average developer needs to know about these things.
So the most important thing to know is that they're not just for the whizzy gratuitous features, but in fact they are for enterprise applications, because animations are about providing rich user experiences which don't just make things look pretty but can keep the users connected to the applications. So you're going from one confusing state of your application to another where they share a lot of information, like some of the text fields and some of the buttons, some of the data entry stuff, and some of the labels that they need to know about. They have to grok to understand a lot of information on both of these screens. Wouldn't it be nice if you could actually transition smoothly from one screen to another instead of simply erasing one screen and then painting the new GUI in place and expecting the user to process all of that information on the fly? What if you actually took them from one screen to the other so that they could smoothly get how they got from one screen to the other, and then they can get on with their job? So animations, yes, they can be cool and whizzy, and you can do all kinds of fun designery kind of stuff, and it certainly has appeal in the consumer market for all kinds of whizzy web applications. But I think more importantly, for enterprise applications, if we can do our job of making animations very easy for the developer to add to the application, then it can make more compelling and useful and productive enterprise applications as well. And the mic is still on, which means that got recorded this time.
It does sound exciting. I feel like I asked better questions last time, but I'm kind of out of steam for questions. We're definitely going to see you at Max and see you on Drunk on Software Max 2009.
Absolutely. I will be at Max, and I will be talking about, can you guess?
Java effects.
So I have a question about effects.
No, you have to guess. What am I talking
Oh,
about?
I think that you're going to be talking about the open web.
It's either JavaFX or the open web or Flex 4 effects. No one knows. You'll have to stay tuned. Wait, he had a question, and you've been talking a lot.
I think that you've been talking a fair amount yourself, sir. I just wanted to know, with regardless of the topic, will you have your French friend with you to cover the exciting, filthy rich features and whatever platform you choose to build them in this time at Max?
I believe my French friend Romain Guy will not be at Max. He will probably be on some sort of honeymoon. He's getting married like 3 times this year. Actually, all to the same woman. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's a French thing. So no, it'll just be me. He may show up at Devox this year. I'm not sure. I may show up at Devox. I don't know. Antwerp is such a lovely place to be in November.
Take 5 jackets.
You had a question.
I had a question about effects. Not FX, but effects.
Yes.
The question is, in Flex 3, there were effect triggers. Every component had effects that you could set effect triggers on. And then Flex 4, Spark, poof. Not that there's a poof effect trigger, but because that would be interesting. But no, there is now no effect triggers. And one thing I was trying to say before we were cut off by the electrostatic off switch was that I find effect triggers to be great for demos, convenient, easy, but I never actually could use them in a real-world production application. So obviously you removed your effect triggers from Spark for a reason. Explain.
All right. Well, that's a nice intro. So, right, in Flex 3 there were basically 3 ways to launch effects. You could have a trigger, so you could say, when this thing moves, I want you to run the move effect. Or you could have a transition for state. So you could say, when I go from this state to that state, I want you to run the following effect in a transition. Or you could manually play an effect. So you could say, well, when the following event is triggered, I want you to call some action script code, and that action script code will play this effect. And it was a bit confusing that there were all these multiple overlapping ways to play effects, so we simply removed triggers from the equation. That seemed to overlap the most because, frankly, triggers are an automated way of hooking up events to manually playing an effect. So we removed that one, so if you want to do something very similar, you could handle an event and launch the effect.
Let's give an example. Let's give an example of that. In Flex 3, if you wanted to trigger the move effect when the X or Y position changed, what you would do is set the move effect to be move. In Flex 4, what would you do?
How dare you put me on the spot like this? So there is a trick here.
Has an event called move, right? Isn't there some move?
No. There's a move function on UI component. There's not a move event.
Okay, maybe on the layout manager? I don't know.
What's that? No, it was really a trigger. The trigger would listen to changes on the XY properties themselves. But the XY properties are actually shifted by the move effect directly. So there was some sort of incestuous behavior between effects and triggers and XY.
Yeah, but then there's also weird things that happen that you wouldn't expect, like when you resize the window, your effect would still trigger when your window was not intentionally moved, but was being moved by the layout manager, which is not necessarily what you wanted.
Right. Because anything that triggered a change in XY position would actually would run the trigger, which would run the effect. Right.
So what do you want to do? Override move, call super.move, and then trigger your effect, or what do you want to? How would be the best way to do this?
I'd frankly have to think about it. Outside the scope of the several beers that I've had this evening.
Sounds like a good Adobe TV.
It does. It does. I should figure out what to do instead for various trigger situations. Because what you basically want to do is listen in on the event that was causing the original move.
Well, but not always, because I don't think.
But not always.
Triggered at the
Right. But you want to listen to not just the symptom of an X and Y changing,
Right.
but you want to listen to, well, why was the X and Y changing?
Right.
And then trigger a move effect based on that instead. So yeah, it'll take a little bit of pondering. And I ain't gonna do it here.
It is quite late, and we've had a lot of drunk on
Bears.
soft terrain.
Yeah.
And bears attacking us.
Yes.
It's been a strange night. So I don't expect you to have the answer out of the box.
You guys missed half of a good conversation and got half of a good conversation.
We could just theorize what I was saying.
We could theorize what you just said, too. We could theorize what you just said. We're really appreciative that Chet ruined his Friday to stay here and there's a mouse running to the Marriott. That's not very classy. Oh, it's over there. You can see it now, Chet. Oh, back under the table. That's not as exciting as the drunk person that wandered in last night looking for the bathroom, or the people in the windows at the pool last night. No naked people, James. They still can't hear you, though. I'm wrapping up for us, though, if that's all right with everyone. And I'm thanking Chet for ruining his Friday to be here at midnight at the Marriott San Francisco. It's going to be a bad day tomorrow, but think of what wonderful information we provided in this podcast. That
should end with describing to our deaf listeners how to decide when you should use Halo versus Spark.
James suggested something for our deaf listeners, but we're done. We're really done, I think. Let's give the hand gesture for goodbye. All right, James? Thank you.